The envelope felt heavier than it should have. Thick, expensive linen paper, the kind you associate with wills and corporate contracts, not a routine update. My lawyer, Arthur Pendleton, wasn't a man given to flourishes or personal correspondence. His world was one of cold, hard facts, of causes and codicils. That's why I'd hired him. So when I saw his personal letterhead, a sliver of ice formed in my gut. I tore it open, expecting some complex legal development in my late uncle's estate. What I found instead was a confession, scrawled in a handwriting I barely recognized. Shaky, uneven, a seismograph of a soul in turmoil. It began. I'm writing this not as your counsel, but as a man who has nowhere else to turn. What I believed to be the happiest day of my life has been revealed as a meticulously constructed lie, and the foundation of my world has crumbled to dust. He wrote of his daughter, Ilara, his only child, the brilliant, kind-hearted girl he'd raised alone after cancer took his wife too soon. He described her not as the successful architect she was, but as the little girl with grass-stained knees, the teenager who argued constitutional law with him at the dinner table for fun. And he wrote of Liam, the man she'd chosen to marry. Charming, intelligent, a rising star in the same field. Arthur had approved, a rare and heartfelt endorsement from a man who trusted no one. The wedding, he said, was perfection, a small, elegant affair in a sun-drenched garden. He remembered the weight of Ilara's hand on his arm as he walked her down the aisle, the way her eyes, so like her mother's, shone with a joy so profound it hurt to look at. He remembered his speech, filled with pride and hope, and the firm, confident handshake Liam had given him afterward. "Take care of my girl," Arthur had said. "I will, sir, with my life," Liam had replied. The letter's tone shifted then, the ink darkening as if pressed by a furious hand. They returned from their honeymoon in Bali, their skin sun-kissed, their laughter echoing through my house as they showed me the photographs. It was 3 days later that the doorbell rang. A woman stood on his doorstep. She was perhaps in her early 30s, her face pale but set with a grim determination. In her arms, she held a child, no more than 18 months old, with a shock of familiar copper-red hair, the same unique shade as Liam's. "Are you Liam's father-in-law?" she'd asked, her voice trembling but clear. Arthur, baffled, had confirmed he was. The woman's name was Clara, and then she delivered the blow that shattered Arthur's reality. "I'm his wife," she said, "and this is his son." The words landed like a physical blow. Arthur described a roaring in his ears, the world tilting on its axis. Liam wasn't just a cheat, he was a bigamist. He had a whole other family, a life parallel to the one he'd just sworn to uphold before God and the law. The wedding, the vows, the certificate, all of it was a grotesque parody, a lie sold to his daughter with the skill of a master conman. But Clara wasn't finished. She hadn't come for revenge, she explained, her eyes welling with tears as her son clutched her leg. She had come because she was terrified. Liam had drained their joint accounts a week before his business trip to Bali. He had taken everything. She had nowhere to go, no one to turn to. In her desperation, she'd done the only thing she could think of. She'd tracked down the family of the other woman. Quote, "I stood there on my own porch, a man who has argued before the Supreme Court, who has built a career on discerning truth from fiction, and I was utterly broken. I looked at this child, this little boy with my son-in-law's eyes, and I saw my daughter's future crumbling into ash. The man she loves, the man I welcomed into my family, is a phantom. And the worst part, the part that truly breaks me, is that I have to be the one to tell her. I have to look into her eyes, those eyes that held so much light on her wedding day, and extinguish it forever." The letter ended there. No salutation, no signature.
just the raw, unbearable weight of a father's impending duty. I sat there, the letter trembling in my hand, the carefully ordered world of my own legal concerns vanishing, replaced by the haunting image of Arthur Pendleton, a man of unwavering logic, preparing to break his daughter's heart with a truth more cruel than any fiction. I sat there for a long time, the letter a dead weight in my lap. The hum of my computer, the distant sound of traffic, it all felt like an intrusion on the profound silence of Arthur's despair. What does a man do in that moment? He wasn't asking for legal advice. He was screaming into the void, and by some terrible chance, I was the only one who could hear the echo. For 2 days, I did nothing. I carried on with meetings, drafted responses, but my mind was in Arthur's grand silent house, standing with him on that polished marble floor, waiting for the axe to fall. I was on the verge of calling him, of offering some feeble, useless words of sympathy, when my phone vibrated with a new email. The sender was Arthur, but the subject line was chillingly professional. Quote, "Update re Thorne Estate." The body of the email was a single, stark sentence. "Please call me at your earliest convenience. It has become complicated." I picked up the phone immediately, my heart hammering against my ribs. He answered on the first ring, his voice a gravelly shadow of its usual authoritative tone. "Thank you for calling. Arthur, I got your letter. I don't know what to say." A long, shaky exhale crackled down the line. "Don't. There are no words. But the situation has evolved. The other woman, Clara, she's here, in my guest room." My mind reeled. What? I couldn't let her go back to a motel with that child. What kind of man would that make me? She had nowhere else to go. She showed me the paperwork, the marriage certificate from 2 years ago, bank statements, everything. It's all devastatingly, incontrovertibly real. He paused, and I could hear the faint sound of a child babbling in the background. "Elara is due here for our weekly dinner tonight. I have to tell her before she arrives. I cannot have her walk in and see them." "Arthur, that's in a few hours. Are you sure you shouldn't have someone there with you? Another family member?" "There is no one else," he said, his voice hollow. "It has always been just Elara and me. And now, it seems, a stranger and her son." He cleared his throat, the lawyer in him fighting to the surface. "But that is not why I asked you to call. There is a legal precedent I need you to look up. The case of State v. Higgins, 1998. It's a fringe case, but it might be relevant." "Higgins? Arthur, that's a fraud case. What does that have to do with this?" "Just look it up," he insisted, with a strange new intensity in his voice. "Specifically, the dissenting opinion by Justice Moreau. I need to know if the principle of constructive trust established in the dissent has ever been successfully argued in a matrimonial context in our jurisdiction." I was baffled, but agreed. I spent the next hour buried in legal databases, pulling up the obscure case. State v. Higgins was about a man who had created an entire false identity to secure a business loan. The dissenting opinion argued that the man's entire life, the assets he had acquired, even the family he had started under that false name, existed under a constructive trust for his original defrauded business partners. It was a radical, almost philosophical legal argument about the ownership of a life built on a lie. As I was reading, a second email from Arthur arrived. It contained a single, grainy photograph, obviously taken from a private investigator's report. It showed Liam, not with Clara, but with a third woman entering a sleek, modern apartment building downtown. The timestamp was from yesterday afternoon. My phone rang again. It was Arthur, his voice now a low, furious whisper. "Did you find it?" "Yes, Arthur, I did, but I don't understand. This is about asset forfeiture. Bigamy is a completely different—"
"It's not about the bigamy," he cut me off, his words sharp and precise. "The bigamy is just the symptom. Clara, she's been telling me more. The lies are deeper, more calculated. The business trips, the conferences, it was all a web. He hasn't just been living a double life. He's been funding it. Ilara's money from her trust fund, the one her mother left her, it's been moving, slowly, cleverly. He's been siphoning it for months." The pieces began to click into place with a terrifying, cold finality. Arthur wasn't just a heartbroken father. He was a hunter who had just scented the trail. The man who built his life on the bedrock of the law had found his enemy outside of it, and now he was using the same tools to dismantle him, brick by brick. "He didn't just break my daughter's heart," Arthur said, and I could almost see the steel returning to his posture, the grim focus settling in his eyes. "He violated my trust. He exploited the system I have dedicated my life to upholding. And he thought he could get away with it because he thought we were just a family, prone to emotion, to collapse. He didn't count on this." The line went dead, leaving a silence that was more profound than any noise. I stared at the grainy photograph on my screen. Liam's face a bland, handsome mask, utterly unaware of the storm that was now converging upon him. Arthur's shift in tone was terrifying. The raw, grieving father had been subsumed by the cold, relentless strategist. He was no longer planning a confession. He was preparing a case, and the defendant was his own son-in-law. The hours crawled by. I tried to work, but my focus was shattered. I pictured Arthur in his study, a room I'd visited once, all dark wood and leather, shelves groaning with legal texts that now seemed less like repositories of justice and more like arsenals. He would be pulling volumes, his fingers tracing the spines of precedents, his mind constructing a cage of law around Liam. He wasn't just going to expose him, he was going to dismantle him. The trust fund, that was the key. This moved this from a personal betrayal to a criminal one. It gave Arthur a battlefield he understood perfectly. My phone buzzed, shattering the silence. A text from an unknown number. My blood ran cold as I read it. "This is Ilara. I'm at my dad's. He gave me your number. He's acting strange. He won't let me in the living room. Says there's a client staying with him." "A client? With a baby? I can hear a baby crying. What is going on? Please, if you know something, you have to tell me." The plan had already gone awry. She was there and he hadn't told her yet. The pressure, the presence of Clara and the child in the next room must have been too much. He was stalling and the situation was spiraling out of control. I had no idea what to do. This was a minefield I had no business walking into. But the sheer, panicked confusion in her text was a plea I couldn't ignore. Before I could formulate a response, my phone lit up again. It was Arthur. "She's here," he said, his voice a tight wire. "She's in the kitchen. Clara and the boy are in the guest wing. The door's closed, but it won't hold. Arthur, she texted me. She's scared. You have to tell her now." "I know, but it's not just the bigamy. It's the money. If I tell her everything at once, it will destroy her.
If I tell her in parts, the shock will be prolonged. There is no right way to do this. For a moment, the lawyer vanished and the father was back, terrified and lost. She's making tea. She's asking me about the new painting I bought. She has no idea that her life is over. I heard a faint, muffled voice in the background, Alara's. Dad? Who are you talking to? Is everything okay? Arthur's voice dropped to a whisper. I have to go. The call ended. I was left clutching my phone, a helpless spectator to a tragedy unfolding in real time. I stared at the text from Alara, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. What could I possibly say? Your husband is a bigamist and a thief, and there's a woman and child in your father's guest room who can prove it! Minutes ticked by, each one an agony. Then another text from Alara. He's coming back in. He looks like he's seen a ghost. He's sitting down. He says we need to talk. Oh God, something is really wrong. I could only imagine the scene. Arthur, sitting across from his daughter, the steam from their tea curling between them like the ghost of their former, uncomplicated lives. Him searching for a beginning to a story that had no good beginning. Her architect's mind, so adept at seeing the underlying structure of things, about to have the foundation of her own reality dynamited. Another text, this one a full minute later, just a single devastating sentence. He just asked me if Liam has ever mentioned someone named Clara.
The name had been released into the atmosphere of that kitchen, a single poisonous seed. I knew Ilara. From Arthur's stories, she was sharp, intuitive. She wouldn't need it spelled out. She would see the connection in her father's anguished eyes, in the unheard cry of a baby from another room. The walls were closing in. I found myself holding my breath, waiting for the next update, dreading what it would say. The silence from Arthur's end was now more frightening than any sound. The confrontation had begun, and the carefully gathered evidence, the legal precedents, the financial records, none of it mattered in the face of the heartbreak that was now inevitably taking place. The silence from my phone became a physical presence in the room, a heavy, suffocating blanket. I paced, the legal briefs on my desk forgotten, my entire world narrowed to the agonizing drama unfolding a few miles away. I imagined Ilara's face, the slow, dawning horror as her father's question hung in the air. Clara, a name that meant nothing and everything. I could almost see the gears turning in her brilliant mind, trying to place it, to fit this unknown woman into the architecture of her life, and finding only a void where an answer should be. My phone finally vibrated, but it wasn't a text. It was a call from Arthur. His voice, when he spoke, was stripped raw, hollowed out by a fresh wave of pain. She knew, he whispered, the words cracking. Not about Clara, not about the bigamy, but she knew something was wrong. She said the name sounded familiar, that she'd seen it on a credit card statement months ago, a hotel charge. When she confronted Liam, he told her it was a clerical error from a corporate retreat, that the company had reimbursed him. He had an answer for everything. She buried her suspicion. She thought she was being a paranoid new wife. A wave of nausea washed over me. The meticulousness of Liam's deception was breathtaking. He hadn't just lied. He had built a fortress of plausible deniability around his lies, gaslighting his own wife into doubting her instincts.
What did she do when you told her? I asked, my voice barely audible. I didn't get the chance to tell her everything, Arthur said, a strange, frantic energy creeping into his tone. I said that Clara was here, that she had a child, and that she claimed to be married to Liam. And Ilara, she didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just went very, very still. Then she stood up, walked to the sink, and poured her tea down the drain, her movements precise and mechanical. She said, I need to see him. I need to look him in the eye and ask him. She's texting him right now, demanding he come over. She told him her father is having a medical emergency. The strategic coldness of it was pure Arthur. She was her father's daughter after all. In the face of total emotional annihilation, she had chosen the most efficient tool to lure her prey, his own perceived advantage. Liam would rush in, expecting a vulnerable family in crisis, a perfect opportunity to offer comfort and further cement his position. He would have no idea he was walking into a tribunal. "Arthur, you can't let this happen. Not like this. It's too volatile. He could be dangerous." "He's a coward and a con man, not a thug," Arthur bit out. But there was a thread of uncertainty there. "And he will answer to me, to us. Clara has agreed to confront him. She's remarkably strong. She's tired of hiding. She's tired of being the secret." The scene he was setting was a tinderbox. A betrayed wife, a defrauded father, and a second, equally betrayed wife all in one room, waiting for the architect of their shared misery. It was a recipe for a disaster that no legal precedent could contain. 20 minutes later, my phone lit up again. A text from Ilara. It was a single, chilling word. "He's here." I felt a jolt of pure adrenaline. I called Arthur immediately. He answered, but didn't speak. I could hear the faint sounds of the house through the receiver, the creak of a floorboard, a distant muffled voice, Liam's, smooth and concerned. "Ilara, honey, your dad? What's going on?" Then Arthur's voice, closer to the phone, low and deadly calm. "We're in the study, Liam."
The audio was faint, but I could make out the sounds of movement, a door closing. Liam's voice again, a little less sure now. "Arthur, what's this about? Ilara, you're scaring me." Then a new voice, feminine and firm, shaking with a mixture of fear and resolve. It was Clara. "Hello, Liam." The silence that followed was absolute. I could picture his face, the charming mask slipping, the calculations firing behind his eyes as he saw his two lives violently colliding in the one place he had likely thought was his sanctuary. I heard a sharp, choked sound, half gasp, half curse. It was Liam. "What is this?" he demanded, his voice rising an octave, the smoothness gone, replaced by a raw, panicked edge. "Who are you? What are you doing in my father-in-law's house? You know who I am, and you know who this is." There was a soft, gurgling sound. She must have been holding their son. "This is insane," Liam blustered. "Arthur, Ilara, I don't know what this woman has told you, but she's clearly unstable. She's been harassing me at work for weeks." It was then that Ilara spoke for the first time, her voice so cold it could have frozen the air in the room. "She says her name is Clara. She says she's your wife. She says this is your son." A pause, so heavy and profound, I could feel its weight through the phone. "Look at him, Liam. Look at his hair. Now tell me she's lying." The silence that followed Ilara's challenge was a physical thing, a suffocating pressure that seemed to warp the very air in Arthur's study. I held my breath, my phone pressed hard against my ear, a silent, horrified witness to the collapse of a world. I could hear Liam's ragged breathing, the sound of a cornered animal. "This is a setup," he finally hissed, the words dripping with a venomous mix of fear and defiance. "You've brought some stranger and her child into your home, and you're taking her word over mine? Your own son-in-law?" It was Arthur who spoke next, his voice a low, dangerous rumble, every syllable honed by a lifetime in courtrooms. "We are not in a court of law, Liam. This is not about reasonable doubt. This is about the truth.
And the truth is in the marriage certificate from Fulton County dated 2 years, 1 month ago. The truth is in the joint bank account you drained last week. The truth is in the trust fund transfers from my daughter's account, routed through shell corporations so amateurish a first-year law student could trace them. The dam broke. I could hear the shock in Liam's exhale. He had been prepared for emotional accusations, for tears and hysterics. He was not prepared for a forensic dismantling. Arthur wasn't just a betrayed father. He was a prosecutor presenting his opening argument. You had me investigated?" His voice was a whisper of disbelief. "I protect what is mine," Arthur stated, the possessiveness in his tone absolute. "You were given stewardship of my greatest treasure, and you treated her like a line of credit. You built your life, your lives," he said, the word laced with contempt, "on the foundation of my daughter's inheritance and a stolen future for that boy in the other room." "It's not what you think," he began, but he was cut off. "Don't!" The word was a whip crack from Alara. The coldness was gone, replaced with a tremor of pure, undiluted fury. "Don't you dare insult me with another lie. Not now, not here. The hotel charge, the clerical error. Was that the first time? Or were there others I was too stupid, too trusting to see? Alara, please, you have to let me explain." His voice was pleading now, the con man's last resort when his lies have failed him. "Explain what?" Clara's voice interjected, clear and sharp. "How you told me your work was classified? How you said you couldn't have photos of us on your phone? How you said the long absences were for our future? You have a son, Liam. He asks for his daddy. What should I tell him now?" The weight of it, the sheer crushing burden of his duplicity, was finally becoming tangible, even through the phone. He was being confronted not with one accusation, but with the interconnected web of his betrayals. He had not merely committed a crime, he had authored 2 separate tragedies, and the authors were now comparing notes. "You have ruined everything," Ilara said, her voice breaking for the first time, the architect seeing the final, catastrophic failure of her own design. "The wedding, our home, it was all just a set, a backdrop for your performance." There was a sudden scuffle of movement, a sharp intake of breath from Arthur. "Sit down, Liam," he commanded. "You are not leaving this room until we have a full accounting, not just for our hearts, but for the law. You will provide passwords. You will sign over every asset you fraudulently obtained. You will do this quietly, and you will do it now, or I will not merely file civil suits and criminal charges for fraud and bigamy. I will use every connection, every favor I have accrued in 40 years of practice to ensure you never work in this city or any other again. I will bury you so deep the sun will be a forgotten memory." The threat hung in the air, immense and terrifyingly credible. This was no longer about emotional restitution. It was about annihilation. Arthur Pendleton was not just seeking to punish Liam, he was seeking to erase him. And then, through the receiver, came another sound, one that chilled me to the bone. It was Liam, but he wasn't crying or pleading or raging. He was laughing, a low, soft, utterly humorless chuckle that was far more unsettling than any outburst of anger could ever be. "A full accounting?" he repeated, the laughter dying in his throat, replaced by a strange newfound calm. "You think you have all the pieces, Arthur? You think you've seen the bottom of this? You're a brilliant lawyer, but you are a naive man." He paused, and I could almost feel him straightening his tie, reassembling the mask. "If you want to talk about the money, if you want to talk about the law, Then fine, let's talk. But you need to understand something first. Ilara's trust fund, it wasn't the beginning. It was the middle. And if you drag this into the light, you won't be the only one who gets burned. You have no idea who you're really dealing with. The air in the study, already thick enough to choke on, seemed to solidify. Liam's laugh had not been one of defiance, but of pity. A chilling, condescending pity that froze the rage on Arthur's face and silenced the sob in Ilara's throat.
"You think I'm the mastermind?" Liam asked, his voice now eerily composed, as if a great weight had been lifted. "You think a man like me could orchestrate this alone? The shell corporations Arthur so easily traced? They weren't mine. They were a test, a simple entry-level feasibility study for a much, much larger operation." He took a deliberate step towards Arthur's desk, ignoring the way both Clara and Ilara flinched. "You threatened to bury me, Arthur. You spoke of connections, of favors. That's adorable." He leaned forward, his hands flat on the polished wood, his eyes locking with the older man's. "The people I work for, they don't have connections. They are the connection. They're the silent, shifting bedrock beneath the city you think you rule. Ilara's trust fund? A drop in the ocean. A petty cash withdrawal. They let me have it because my performance here, my integration into your esteemed family, was worth more. You weren't just a mark, Arthur. You were a reference letter." The confession was more terrifying than any denial. It was a surrender that revealed a battlefield infinitely larger and more dangerous than they had ever imagined. Ilara stared at the man she had married, and she no longer saw a charming fraud. She saw a terrified pawn, a canary in a coal mine who had just started to sing a warning of the poisonous air. "Who?" Arthur's voice was a dry rasp, all his legal threats rendered instantly obsolete. "Who are they?" "If I knew names, I'd be dead," Liam said, a genuine flicker of fear finally crossing his face. "They are a system, a network. You don't find them, they find you. They offered me a way out of a life of mediocrity. All I had to do was play a part, marry the right girl, gain the trust of a powerful man, report back. The bigamy? A calculated risk. Clara was my cover, my real life, in case this one ever went sideways. But they knew about her. They know everything." He turned to Ilara, his expression a twisted canvas of regret and self-preservation. "I did care for you, Ilara, in my way, but you were always a stepping stone. And you," he said, looking at Arthur, "you were the destination." The revelation was a nuclear bomb detonating in the heart of the room. The personal betrayal was monstrous, but it was now dwarfed by the existential threat looming behind it. Arthur wasn't just a father seeking justice. He was a target who had just become aware of the crosshairs on his back. In the devastating silence, a new sound emerged. Clara, who had been holding her son tightly, her body trembling, slowly stood up. She walked towards Liam, not with anger, but with a profound, earth-shattering pity. She stopped in front of him, her son looking at the man he called Daddy with wide, innocent eyes.
"You poor, stupid man," she whispered, her voice carrying through the stillness. "You thought you were building a fortune, but you were just building your own cage. And you tried to put our son in it with you." She then turned to Arthur and Ilara. "He's given you the only real thing he has left to give, a warning. He's right. If you pursue this, they will not just come for him, they will come for all of you. To silence you, to make an example." Arthur Pendleton, the man of unwavering logic, felt the foundations of his entire world, Not just his family, but his career, his understanding of power and justice crumble into dust. The law was a toy in the face of this shadowy leviathan. He looked at his daughter's shattered face, then at the innocent child in Clara's arms, a child who shared blood with the man who had brought this plague to their door. He made a choice, not as a lawyer, but as a patriarch. "Get out," Arthur said to Liam, his voice devoid of all emotion, a flat, dead calm. Liam, his bravado utterly gone, just nodded, a broken marionette. He slunk out of the study, and a moment later, the front door clicked shut, the sound as final as a tomb ceiling. The three of them were left standing in the wreckage: the father, the wife, and the other wife. The traditional lines of betrayal had been vaporized. They were no longer adversaries. They were survivors of the same shipwreck, cast adrift on a dark and unknown sea. Arthur looked from his daughter's tear-streaked face to Clara's resolute one, and then to the little boy with the copper-red hair. The path forward was shrouded in mist and danger, but it was a path they would now have to walk together. The wedding was a lie. The groom had been a secret, but the future, terrifying and uncertain, was the one truth they now all shared. And in that shared, chilling truth, a new, unbreakable, and utterly unexpected alliance was born from the ashes of a beautiful, perfect lie.